The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, get up, Jesus is calling you." He threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him in reply, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied to him, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "Go your way. Your faith has saved you." Immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Dear brothers and sisters, it's good to be back. I was out last week with the flu, and it was kind of fitting that last week's first reading said, "The Lord was pleased to crush him in infirmity." I couldn't help but realize that certainly applied to me last week. Well, then I realized that this week's first reading also applies to me, because in our first reading from Jeremiah, we heard, "Shout with joy for Jacob. The Lord has delivered his people." And I feel like I've been delivered from this illness, so I'm very grateful. Well, our readings then today, especially the gospel with the healing of Bartimaeus, invite us to reflect on how God heals still today through his church and through the saints and in various ways. I am blessed to know Maureen Daigen. Maureen is the woman in the wheelchair there. She was healed miraculously through the intercession of St. Faustina back in 1981. Her husband there, Bob, took her and one of our Marian priests, Father Seraphim, over to Poland. He was convinced that she would be healed of her illness through St. Faustina's intercession. It was like an inspiration that came to him. And sure enough, she was. Her illness was called Milroy's disease. It was a form of lymphedema. Her legs swelled because of the accumulation of the fluid in the legs, and it was so bad that one leg already had to be amputated, and the other leg was getting bad and was going to need to be amputated, but then she was healed completely and didn't need the amputation. And so her healing resulted in the beatification of St. Faustina in 1983. Well, then this brings us to the question of, well, what happens in the many, many cases when people aren't healed? What happens when I pray and I don't see the miracles that I'm looking for? Do we give up on our faith? Well, The Chosen, the wonderful television show The Chosen, dealt with this. Are any of you fans of The Chosen? Wonderful show. If you haven't watched it, I highly encourage it. It's about the apostles, and it kind of fills in a lot of the backstories and things like that we don't really know, but there's some artistic license there, and it's a lot of fun. Well, this character here on the screen is one of the two Jameses, James the Lesser. In the show, they have fun with that, and they call him Little James. And so Little James has a limp, and it becomes a focus in one of the episodes where, of course, he's wondering, how come Jesus doesn't heal me? And we might all wonder this. These are the apostles. These are the ones that Jesus is sending out to go and heal others. Why not heal one of them? And so that question comes up, and basically the answer is that which which is a greater demonstration of faith? Someone who has received a great miracle and then says, I believe in the Lord? Or someone who has not received a great miracle, even if they've been asking for it, and still says, I believe in the Lord, and I'm going to stick with him no matter what? Well, that's one reason why Jesus may not necessarily heal someone, and that's what the Chosen puts forth as a reason here. It's for faith, ultimately, that we might be perhaps stretched in our faith, but then really demonstrate a lively, vibrant faith to the world, that even if we don't see miracles, we still stay with Jesus. Well, it turns out that in real life, the actor, Jordan Ross, really has a limp. It's not just in the show. And how it came about that he was chosen, somehow he was able to conceal it. He was chosen to be that actor. And then on the first day of filming, his limp was then evident. And, the director, producer there, Dallas Jenkins, thank you. Dallas Jenkins came up to him and said, so tell me about this limp. And so Jordan explained that, well, he was born 2 months premature. He had cerebral palsy and scoliosis, and that was the reason for the limp. And so Dallas just said, cool. And they continued with it and then incorporated it into the story. That was pretty awesome. Well, that then brings us to the next reason, perhaps an even deeper reason of why the Lord sometimes doesn't heal. And we hear a little hint of this in the first reading, where through the prophet Jeremiah, God says, I will gather my people from the ends of the world, the blind, the lame in their midst, mothers and those with child. And so we hear about God bringing back his people who have been in captivity, and not just bringing back the strong, those who survive, survival of the fittest and all that, but even bringing back the weak, the blind, the lame, the crippled, etc., cherishing them as children of God. And at the very end of the reading, we hear God saying this, for I am a father to Israel. So in this, we hear how God is a good father who loves all his children and has deep compassion for them, even and especially those who are weakest. And throughout the Old Testament, we hear how God has great compassion for widows and orphans and those who otherwise would be rejected by society. And so this is then an invitation for us to ponder, how is our society today treating those who otherwise would be rejected? And we might think especially of cases where, maybe a mother, if she's told by her doctor that the baby in her womb has some kind of anomaly, we would say, a birth defect of some kind, what is the pressure of society today? Which way is it going? More toward the direction of embracing life and welcoming children even with disabilities? Or more in another direction of even encouraging abortion? This is a great thing for us to ponder today, because which way is our society going? It was Pope John Paul II and many others, including Gandhi and I think even Thomas Jefferson, who basically said the same thing, that a society can be measured by the way it treats the most vulnerable, the weakest among us. How is our society today? Which way is it going? That's something for us to ponder. And if there is anyone here among us who has been perhaps pressured into abortion or has chosen that for any reason whatsoever, first, our hearts go out to you. The church is very much still in the business of healing and can provide much healing for you if this is what you've experienced. There's a Rachel's Vineyard retreat, for example, coming up next weekend in Lamont, not too far from here, about 45 minutes from here. And Rachel's Vineyard is a wonderful ministry that provides healing for people, men and women, who have been affected by abortion. So I highly encourage that if there's anyone here among us or listening through live stream who has been affected by abortion for whatever reason. Well, sometimes the Lord then puts people in our lives where he then stretches us and helps us to put into practice this kind of compassion for the weakest among us. And I myself was blessed when I was in college My roommates, one of my roommates there is in the center. His name is Rob. He's the one who, I guess we would have to say a person of less stature, however they say that politically correctly these days, right? The person of less stature. Great roommate, great guy, but he also had cerebral palsy. And he hides it pretty well, but you can kind of tell, you see his left hand there is on his hip, but his right hand is concealed under his garment. He didn't have the use of his right arm. And so that meant that there were times when he would have to ask me to do some things I never thought I'd ever have to do for someone, such as cut his fingernails on his left hand because he couldn't use his right arm to do so. And there are many other scenarios where I found myself having to just help him out through normal day-to-day tasks. He was a brilliant guy. He is a brilliant guy. But still, there were just ordinary human tasks that he needed help with. And so it kind of stretched me during my college years to try to put into practice the mercy of God and to do these favors for him. And so through it all, what is God doing then when we find ourselves having to help someone who experiences a weakness or has a disability of any kind? What is God doing for us? But giving us the kind of hearts that he has. Hearts which love others mercifully, hearts that serve. And we can even ponder this and thank God for the people in our lives who need a little extra help. Because that means that they're doing us a favor by needing us, by stretching us at times. Sometimes it's a very heavy cross, but they stretch us also to love more mercifully, which is to say, to love with the heart of Jesus, the heart that is sympathetic and compassionate for those who do not have the same abilities as we do. And so may the Lord truly bless us today and help inspire us not only to hold on in faith when we don't see healings, but to then see that people's suffering as an opportunity for us to love with the heart of Jesus. And may the Lord bless us in this effort as we keep trying to imitate him more and more.